You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years.
In this edition, we're going to take a look at Rule 5, which is talking about cell phone usage. It reads, cell phones may be used for keeping time in other reasonable situations during the hunt. Cast members should not be using them to contact other casts or individuals at the club to find out information pertaining to scores. Individuals found guilty of correspondence or relaying any type of electronic messaging with reference to scores that is deemed detrimental to the integrity of event placements or the hunt are subject to suspension from United Kennel Club.
Yeah, in today's world, cell phones, we all have clocks on them, and oftentimes I use them. I use my cell phone all the time for keeping time in a hunt. Run the time down and this and that. Maybe it might be tree times or whatever. A lot of different times that are happening. Clocks are being used when you're out on a competition, and that's fine to use the one on your cell phone. But what you don't want to use them for is for trying to find out what scores are on another cast that you might be competing with for score or what have you. Those things are you can't be influenced by that, or you shouldn't just hunt your hunt, and let the chips fall where they may in terms of what's happening, because really the intent behind that is so nobody's influenced by their decision making or voting, how they vote in the field, if they know what somebody else has in terms of a score, and really if it's and we have had situations, unfortunately, where cell phones were used with messaging or calling back and forth with reference to score, where it was felt that it had an influence or could have had an influence on the integrity of the hunt or their scores or something like that, or in the way somebody, had an effect on it. That's a pretty serious offense. You don't want to get caught using that. So, pretty simple. Use your phone for what you need to use it for, but as far as things pertaining to the hunt and other casts and scores and all that stuff, you'll find that out soon enough.
A lot of common sense here, but if you think about it real quick, you're putting other people who you're sending it to, they're getting a really big advantage, and you're putting the people in your cast at a very big disadvantage. So pretty straightforward, something to think about.
There you go. Section 5, cell phone usage.
In this edition, we're going to take a look at Rule 6, which pertains to tracking and training collars. And we're going to start out looking at a bullet point which is titled Tracking Only Devices. It reads, the handheld of locating only devices may be carried by the handler. Device may be used during the hunt, but only under strict provisions as outlined below. A dog must be heard treeing before a tree call may be accepted, regardless of any tree alerts on the handheld.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. There used to be a time when you obviously couldn't use tracking systems even after they first came out. So it hasn't been that long, but it's a handy tool to have, and the intent of allowing their use first and foremost is for safety of the dogs.
Sure.
Beyond that, United Kennel Club has some rules and some strict rules, provisions for their use, but you can use them. And we're going to talk about the provisions a little bit later here, but the first part of their one key thing there is the handheld may be carried by the handler, and it may be used, so that means carried and looked at and all this and that, and you can see where your dog is. But even then, some of them have alerts on them to where your dog's barking, so your dog may be out so far that you can't hear it, and you show a tree alert or something like that on it. Your handheld can't be used for the purpose of declaring a dog treat.
The next one here can be a little bit trickier, and it's tracking and training combo devices. Any handheld device capable of both locating, tracking, and controlling, which is considered stimulating or toning, may not be carried by the handler during the hunt. The handheld must be left in the vehicle and may not be used by the handler or spectators during hunt time. However, the handheld may be used during timeout situations during the hunt for locating purposes only.
Yeah, so there's several different systems out there. The most common is, like the dog tray that we have, and those collars have usually they have the prongs in them. And then there's also the collar that doesn't have the prongs in and isn't capable of stimulating or shocking or toning a dog. So any collar that has that, that might just be or that and tracking both, those are typically collars that we might use during the week or for training purposes or what have you. They're not allowed, those collars are not allowed in competition. But you can actually have one on a dog in competition. But if you do, the handheld device of that must be left in the vehicle if you do. And the only time that you can use it is during a timeout, and then you can only use it for locating purposes. Obviously, you can't tone or shock your dog for that. And we'll get into it a little bit later. Using it, getting caught using it, shocking or toning your dog, even in a timeout, has some pretty serious consequences.
Now let's talk about training only devices.
One other thing I want to say about that, though, sometimes we get asked the question with, well, what if I take the prongs out of the collar? Can I use it now? Can I carry my handheld now when I can't shock the dog? The answer is no, but you still have that tone feature. And sometimes that toning feature is, with the shocking, I'm controlling my dog. With the toning feature, essentially or technically, I can control somebody else's dog that may be tone broken close enough to hear it. So yeah, no, you can't. Even with the prongs out, that doesn't mean it. Just if the collar is capable, whether the prongs are in or out, all that doesn't matter. You can't carry that hand.
Yeah, good point. Now let's talk about training only devices. Any handheld device capable of controlling a dog, which is stimulating or toning, must be left in vehicle and may not be used by handler or spectators until dog wearing device is scratched and all other dogs are recovered for recasting. Controlling device rule violations may result in suspension.
Yeah, back years ago, the common one that might have been used was like a Tritronics or something like that, just the collar and just had it was just the controlling device, with and some folks are still using those. So that's what this is. Training only devices is what it's talking about, referring to. And they can be put on a dog too, but the handheld, again, just like the other combo unit we talked about, it's got to be left in the truck. And the only time it can be used, and the same goes for the controlling device of another one, is the only time you can use a controlling feature like shocking or toning is if all other dogs in your cast are recovered. Recovered means handled. For recasting, they are recovered. They've got a handle on them, and then your dog is scratched. Is the only way that you can. Only then could you use it on your dog. And then it goes on to say that last one is what I keyed in on a minute ago. Controlling device rule violations may result in suspension. And you and I both know there's a couple of guys on the list that have found that out to be very true. Can't do that. Pretty strict, very strict.
Yeah, so now that we've covered the different kind of devices, it also has a little bit more right here below it. In bold, it says, under no circumstances shall telemetry be used to determine the scoring of any dogs. Covered that a little bit there in the beginning, calling your dog treat, a dog you can't hear, and you call it treat off of your device without actually hearing the dog. That's a big no-no. There's other circumstances where that could be the case. It continues here by saying, if by way of telemetry a handler deems dog to be in danger, per an item outlined in Rule 14, they may ask for a cast vote to call time out. If a majority is not reached, the handler may withdraw, then handle the dog due to safety concerns.
Yeah, I think that's mentioned in the onset here. That is the number one reason for allowing their use during the course of a hunt is for safety of dogs. So if we can call timeout if we have a majority of the cast vote to do so. Sometimes we might not get majority. Just because you think we need to call timeout, maybe not, or I do. It doesn't mean everybody else thinks we need to. But we have to have a majority to be able to call timeout. But in any case, if I feel my dog is in danger, even if we can't call timeout, at least I know that. And what's more important, the dog or the hunt?
Exactly.
The dog, 100% of the time, I would think.
Exactly.
I would hope so. So then at least I can still have whereas before when we couldn't look at these, I may not have known that my dog was in danger. At least I have the opportunity to withdraw my dog and go get him out of the situation he's in.
When in the hunt becomes secondary at that point.
Exactly.
It goes on to say, at no time may a handler demand the cast walk in the direction of a dog that has not been heard opening. The judge or majority of the cast, when hunting judge is used, may agree to walk in that direction.
Yeah, what that's for is for obviously you don't hear a dog whether it's opening or it's not. I know where my dog is. It might be 500 yards through there, and it might be over hill. We're not going to hear it if it does open up, or maybe my alerts are going off and barking alerts are going off and we can't hear it. I can't demand the cast walk in that direction of a dog that we haven't heard opening. Now to say, I may tell the judge or let the cast know that hey, where my dog is, it's over there, and they may agree. But hey, we can step over here, 50 yards over here, and just to be fair about it, but they don't necessarily have to. But they can agree to walk in that direction, but you can't make them walk in that direction. It's at their discretion.
Then it says here, when considering the use of telemetry during the hunt, the handler may not interfere with any handler's ability to listen for their dog. This is to be rigidly enforced. Handlers not adhering after being warned of such by the judge shall result in their dog being scratched from the cast.
Okay, now that's a rule that was implemented right soon after one of the most popular GPS systems that came out at first was the Garmin, where it has the GPS capabilities and everything else. So before that, we had everybody use the beep beep systems.
Yep.
And this rule here, at the time when we implemented the use of GPS and telemetry, was when a lot of guys were still using beep beep systems. This rule that you mentioned right here was actually for that. So you don't hear any most of the time these other systems we use today. There's not much to be interfered with, but that's what that rule was for. In other words, I couldn't stand there, beep, 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 and you can't hear your dog. We laugh about it now, but it's been a little while since we've had this rule, but that's what that was intended for.
My mind goes to one of the pro handlers out there, just time's running down on the hunt. I'm trying to get my dog treed in, and they're beeping right in the judge's ear.
I turn it up.
I guarantee that would have happened.
Yeah.
And then there's just one last sentence here to put a bow on the discussion about tracking and training callers. And it just says, a hunt master or panel may not consider any debate that is based on telemetry use. So I think a situation you may talk about sometimes is maybe the judge deemed that the dog moved from a tree, and then the guy questions it. It comes back for them to hear it, and he shows you his phone with his Dog Trail Pathfinder 2 map, and it shows that his dog was stationary. Those things aren't always correct on exact movement, or if it were to get off the tree a little bit and come back. So the hunt master and the panel can't consider that, nor can UKC when we're making a determination if you were to try to appeal it to us.
Yep. Telemetry is a great tool to have, and safety of the dogs and this and that. But even then, even with all this, we're still going to use our ears and our eyes to judge, just as we always have. I think that pretty much covers that. It's an important section of the rule book. You need to know what those rules are, and that we don't because as we talked about a little bit, hey, if we misuse it, there's a chance that there's some pretty serious consequences. We need to know that, So there you go. With Eukanuba, stamina is the one difference I'm seeing. When I'm running hair up north, my dogs will put on 10, 12, 15 miles of solid running, and they just don't tire as easily or as quickly. Oftentimes, my work schedule does not allow me to have the desired physical conditioning on my dogs, but even then, as many as 25 or more miles a day of hard running is just another day in the office. To me, it's been apparent Eukanuba's 30-20 sport formula is making that difference. Eukanuba, the official performance dog nutrition partner of UKC.
In this edition, we're going to talk Rule 7, which has to do with the point system. It starts out with Rule 7A, and it tells us no strike points will be awarded.
Yeah, and I guess probably the only reason it has that in there is because typically in most of our other dog sports like coonhounds and beagles and such, trailing sports, there are strike points when dogs open on the ground for trailing before they are treed. But most Feist dogs are silent on trail, and they only tree, so that's why there are no strike points at all. Tree points only.
Rule 7B tells us the point system: 100 points for dog declared treed first, 50 points for second, and 25 points for third.
Yep, and that's pretty self-explanatory. There's no countdown or anything like that on tree. It's just as simple as that. 100 for the first dog, second 50 points, which it doesn't matter if it treed 5 seconds after the first dog or just before the tree closed. Second tree is 50 points. Third tree is 25 points. Obviously, you don't need more than that with only 3 dogs in the cast.
That's right. 7C goes on to tell us points may be split for tree position when called tree positions cannot be determined.
Yep, and that happens sometimes when 2 dogs are called treed right at the same time, and oftentimes a judge just couldn't decide or determine who called first or what have you. So in that case, and that every now and then it happens, and not all that often, but when it does, they can't tell, then you just split the points. And on the scorecard, there is a split positions for whether it's first and second that was split, or second and third, or first, second, and third, all of them. It tells you what those split points are right on your scorecards if that happens.
Make it easy on you.
Yeah.
And then Rule 7D says if squirrel is caught on the ground, points are received as follows. For 3 dogs, 58.3 points. For 2 dogs, 75 points. And for 1 dog, 100 points.
Yeah, so first tree there was 100 points, so that's why if it's just a 1 dog, it's the same amount of points there. But yeah, so if that's the case, then if all 3 are involved, then you split them that way. And there again, those points are also noted on the scorecard as well. As are all of these points, or all of these that we're talking about. They're on the back of the scorecard, but we're talking about split points, and then this if squirrel's caught on the ground, that's what you do instead of tree points. Even if they were called treed, you would still, let's say you have a dog treed for 100 and second one for 50 and another for 25. You get in there, they've got the coon or the squirrel caught on the ground. Automatically, you change those points. If all 3 of them, it's 58 points. Just 2 of the 3 or 2 dogs involved or whatever, it's 75 points for each. You would adjust your tree points accordingly.
Yeah.
Or it may be one where they just catch them on the ground and without dogs being declared treed.
Real simple for your brains. You just take the the tree positions there and you divide it by the number of dogs there. So.
That's right. That's exactly it. So yeah, there's the point system for Section 7. Pretty simple and pretty short, but that explains just tree points.
In this edition, we're going to take a look at Rule 8, which pertains to just general information. Rule 8A tells us judge is to be informed of any dog's peculiarities before the hunt.
Yeah, there's that word again. I think we talked about it in the first section or earlier on, and then when we started covering these rules, that word peculiarities, one of the hardest words in the whole rule book, I think. But yeah, that is very common before a hunt starts. Where the judge will ask, hey, anything I need to know about your dogs. So a peculiarity may be, if my dog trees when I go in to handle it, maybe as soon as it sees me, or when I get close, it might come off the tree and come out to meet me. That's a very common one that I might want to tell the judge. And that's, if a dog does that, that's all okay, as long as it goes back tree satisfactorily, this or that. Or it might have some other little, quirks or whatever. Yeah. But I just tell the judge what that is, so everybody's aware of it, whatever that might be. Could be a very bunch of different things.
Simple as my dog likes to sit down a few feet off the tree when the trees or something.
Different things.
Could be a whole bunch of different things.
Yep.
Rule 8B tells us casts must remain together unless timeout is called or permission has been granted by the judge.
Yep, very important rule right here, and we've talked about it a lot. We see that a lot up here at UKC, and oftentimes when we hear it all the time, folks call about their scenarios that happen, and I think you and I both love to hear about scenarios and rule stuff and this and that, but how many times do we see bad things happen because the cast did not stay together as they should have? And there's lots of reasons for that, and that's a rule. Cast must remain together unless timeout is called, and obviously when timeout's called, we got to go handle or gather up unhandled dogs. And but the only time they can't, that you don't stay with the cast is if you're given granted permission by the judge. Before you just up and leave, you want to make sure the judge is allowing you to leave.
Next one here, 8C, tells us a dog must bark to be declared treed.
Yep. So you must, sometimes we're in a position where we can see a dog on a tree. Oftentimes Feist hunt fairly close. They're kind of a sight hound or a sight dog more so than a trailing dog. And sometimes you are where you can see them. And let's say a dog barks a couple times, and really you need to call a dog immediately after it barked if you want to declare it treed. But let's say it barked a couple times and I see it over there standing on the tree and it's just looking up. It's not saying anything. It has to bark before I can call it treed. I can't just because it's standing there on a tree looking up and maybe even looking at a squirrel. It has to bark before I can call it treed.
Moving on here to Rule 8D.
And let me just back up. The judge should just simply not accept a call on a dog that isn't barking. If I call my dog and hey, dog must bark before I can accept it.
Yeah. 8D here tells us when a dog is declared treed by the handler, the dog must hold the tree for 2 minutes unless all dogs are declared treed or handled or hunt time expires.
Yeah, so let's cover that just really quickly here. So 2 minutes. Whenever the first dog is declared treed, the judge is going to start a 2-minute clock. And that dog has to hold that tree for 2 minutes. The only exception would be unless all dogs are declared treed, whether they are on the same tree with this dog or they could even be on separate trees. And sometimes in squirrel hunting, it can happen fast and furious. And as you know, in coon hounds too, you do a lot of the coon hunting, and it's the same way there. But this can also be pretty fast, so it doesn't matter. 2 minutes, whether it's, and if a dog's on a separate tree, there's going to be a separate clock for that. But if all dogs in the cast are declared treed, time is stopped at that point. And as soon as the tree is, we call that also the tree is closed, whether it's the 2 minutes or all dogs are handled or treed, the tree is closed and you go right to him as soon as the tree is closed.
That Rule 8D goes on.
Or hunt time expires. That's another one. Let's say we're down at the end of the hunt and we have 30 seconds. A dog is declared treed. 30 seconds later, the hunt's up. Once at 30 seconds, the hunt time is up, we go directly to him.
Gotcha.
Because it's the same thing. No other dogs can be declared treed there because hunt time's out.
The next sentence here says, dog must bark at least once every minute. And in parentheses, it says, if only one dog in cast or one dog remaining in cast, dog must still hold tree for 2 minutes.
Yeah, so we talked about a dog must bark in order to be declared tree. They must also basically show tree, and they must bark a minimum that they must bark at least once every minute. So let's say a dog barked, one time, shuts up, 30 seconds later, I'm going to put the clock on them. They have 1 minute. If they don't bark in the next minute, they're going to be minus for it. They got to bark at least once every minute.
That's not asking too much.
No, it doesn't seem like it, but yeah, it just depends on the dog.
And you were kind of talking about how if all dogs are declared treed or handled, that you don't have to run tree time, but there is a little caveat to that. If there's only one dog remaining or just a one dog cast, even though technically all dogs in the cast are declared tree because it's only one, you still have to run the 2 minutes.
That's right. And I'm glad you brought that up because I would have, that's a good one to point out. If it is one dog remaining or one dog left or one dog remaining or just one dog in the cast, then you have to wait 2 minutes every time.
Rule 8E goes on to tell us any dog declared treed within hunting time will be scored.
Yep, that's a good rule. So we talked about timeout earlier on, or timeouts where we can majority can decide to call timeout. But any dog that is declared treed before timeout is called will still and needs to be scored, and rightfully so. It was declared treed in hunting time or when time was in, and it should be scored. Deserves to be scored.
Yeah, before timeout or before the end of the hunt.
Exactly right.
Rule 8F says after a dog is declared treed, the cast is to move at a reasonable pace towards the tree, but not arriving at the tree prior to the 2 minute tree time elapsing. The handler of the dog declared treed first will determine how close to the tree is acceptable as long as it's not interfering with the dog treeing or encouraging the declared dog to stay treed.
Yeah, I think if you just read that, I don't think we can explain it much better than that, really. And the idea is, yeah, you want to get there as soon as you can after your tree time or the 2 minutes has expired, but also not too quick to interfere with other dogs or maybe encourage other dogs to go in just because you're there,
True. Yeah.
or influence the dogs in any matter, or whether it's good or bad. When we talked about the dog's peculiarities, was a dog sees somebody or handler and might come off the tree, things like that. We don't want to be there and too early either, So, and it says that let me see, the handler of the dog declared treed first will determine how close we get to this tree.
Yeah.
So, well, one guy might be good with being away 10 yards away, won't affect him, and where the next guy, or I might say, I might want to stay at least 30, 40, 50 yards away.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yep. Rule 8G says after the 2 minutes has elapsed, the tree is considered closed and no other dog may be declared treed on that particular tree.
Yeah, self-explanatory. After 2 minutes is up, it's closed, and doesn't, even if another dog comes in there and starts treeing before we get there, that tree is closed. I can't tree that dog on there. It's not eligible for any tree points there.
Rule 8H tells us if dog is minus for leaving or failing to bark, the tree shall be reopened and first tree position available if no other dog was declared treed.
Yeah, it seems like maybe that rule should have been bumped up a little bit behind when we talked about, the dog must bark at least once every minute. But in this case, if they do get minus for failing to bark, if that rule gets them, then that tree would open back up. It hasn't been scored yet, so that it opens back up, so long as no other dog was there, that was also declared treat or what have you, so yeah, and then those first tree positions would be available again to another dog, and it could even be the same dog for that matter. You might have a situation where my dog didn't bark, or that clock got him, where it didn't bark at least once in a minute, so I'm going to get minused, and now it starts barking again after that. I might want to re-tree it again. I'm going to go in for first tree again, and then we're going to start a brand new 2-minute clock for holding the tree, as well as for barking time. So, yep, once it's been minused, that position becomes available again.
Yeah, well, it's not been. You never made it in.
Haven't
scored it.
That's
so
right.
It's not previously scored tree.
Exactly right.
Rule 8I says after 2 minutes and tree is closed, the judge may declare that the dogs can be handled. Handlers can leash their dogs only after judge permits. See Rule 2E if applicable.
Yep, so there you go. And that's what, once your 2 minutes is up, the judge is going to tell you to handle your dogs. And it's right there, it says handlers can leash their dogs only after judge permits. So I think it's always a good rule of thumb for anybody to don't turn your dog loose until the judge tells you, and don't handle your dog until the judge tells you to.
That's right.
That's always a good rule of thumb to go by and to remember.
Yeah, I think
just get permission, whether turning loose or handling. Make sure.
Actually, on our
don't want any surprises and figure out it's a scratching offense or something like that, or a penalty that goes with it.
Some of our youth paperwork, we outline that, try to instill it in kids before they ever get real active in the hunts, and it's a good thing. Just listen to your judge, and you'll be in good shape.
Yep, sometimes there's reasons for that, where the judge is judging a dog, and he's actually seeing how the dog's reacting here before, for whatever reason, before it should be handled, like showing tree satisfactorily and things like that.
Yeah. Rule 8J tells us the judge should observe and make sure that dog declared treed is showing treed by either looking up or barking up before allowing handlers to leash their dogs. Dog is not to be minused if he comes back a short distance to meet handler, so long as the dog returns to the tree and trees satisfactorily. If a dog declared treed is not showing treed.
Yep. So there you go. So, is just by looking up, once we're at the tree now. So just by looking up, satisfies that the dog is showing treed, barking or what have you, So it's a little different than what you're used to in coonhounds, Trevor, But like I said, there's sight hound or sight dogs, So it's a little bit different sometimes, and it, I've seen dogs with so many different tree styles as far as how they bark or how much they bark. You see some dogs, little Feist, that will just be yapping away at the tree, barking 80 barks a minute, and then the others are just barking a couple times, and but you can tell they're intense. They see it, and it's there's just different styles here, and it's but yeah, it has to meet the satisfaction of the judge. So either by looking up or barking before allowing them to be handled.
And I should finish this sentence here. It says, dog is not to be minused if he comes back a short distance to meet handler so long as the dog returns to the tree and trees satisfactorily. If a dog declared treat is not showing treed, by actively treeing, dog to be minused and tree reopened if no other dogs have been declared treed.
Yeah.
Actively treeing is determined by judge or if questioned by the majority cast vote when hunting judge is used. Once tree is declared closed and dogs are in sight, dogs are not required to continue to bark but must remain at tree or be minused.
So there you go. I think that if you read that, I think that kind of explains everything right there. Once you're in sight of the dogs, then they're no longer required to be barking. That minute that we talked about, that's no longer in, but now it's just, they just need to be showing that they're actively treeing either by looking up or barking. That's basically it right there. But yeah.
We talk about this a lot. Is if you're squirrel hunting a lot, you can pretty much tell when you get in there if a dog's treeing or not treeing.
Mm-hmm.
They may be different styles, and I guess judgment could vary between one judge and another. But for the most part, a squirrel hunter's going to know if their dog's treeing or not. If a dog's treeing or not.
That's right.
Rule 8K says when dogs tree and squirrel, and it says in parentheses here, excluding ground squirrel or flying squirrel, is seen within the 5 minutes of search time. Two things here. By a non-hunting judge or by a majority of cast when hunting judge is used. Squirrel must be in tree dog is on or in a tree within 15 normal steps, which is around 45 feet of tree dog is on.
Yep. So we have a couple things going on in this rule in 8K. So it's going to say here in parentheses, excluding ground squirrel or flying squirrels. Right there's a rule that says that we can't score on a ground squirrel or a flying squirrel. That's where that's going to be noted in the rule book. So, and then the only other time that we can score this squirrel if it's seen within that 5 minutes of search time. And then by a non-hunting judge. In this series, we've talked about the difference between non-hunting judges and hunting judges. In a non-hunting judge situation, if we have one, then only he or she has to see the squirrel. But if we're using a hunting judge, then the squirrel needs to be seen during that 5 minutes at some point by a majority of the cast, which in a 3-dog cast is going to be 2. In a 2-dog cast, it's still going to be 2. Doesn't matter if a hunting judge or not. And we talked about elsewhere in this series where that's automatically scoring trees automatically going to go to a majority of the cast, or as far as plussing a squirrel or minusing a tree. So squirrel must be in tree dog is on, which is the tree the dog's treed on, or in a tree within 15 normal steps, which a normal step is considered 3 feet, which is 45 feet of the tree that the dog is on. So obviously squirrels tend to timber out, and obviously you want to give the dogs credit for what they So yeah, that's why you give them 45 feet from where the dog is on. And oftentimes it does not take them long to get out that far either. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
15 normal steps, and oftentimes instead of carrying a tape measure with you to go the 45 feet, it'd be reasonable, 15 normal steps. And here again, guess who's going to make that determination?
The judge.
The judge.
Moving on here to Rule 8L. Says only one tree is counted even if more than one squirrel is up tree.
Yeah, I don't think we need to explain that other than if you don't, we're not going to double our points if there's 2 squirrels.
No double or triple points.
Nope, no double points here.
Moving on to Rule 8M then. Says when squirrel is seen timbering from tree to tree and the dog is moving with the squirrel, the tree is to be scored as plus. This applies only if squirrel is seen.
Yep, that's right. So I don't think I can make that any clearer than that. But yeah, technically you want the dog to follow the squirrel,
right?
Can you imagine if we're out squirrel hunting, or if we're trying to put supper on the table, and I have a dog that just trees right exactly where the squirrel went up or where it first saw it, and the squirrel's timbering on out. I'd kind of want my dog to follow that thing, make sure I can get it, know where it is, because it's not gonna like I said, sometimes a squirrel can timber out pretty quickly. Move right on down the woods further than you think.
I think most of the concepts for a lot of UKC's hunting ops programs is to try to emulate a hunt as much as we can. And
Absolutely.
a
This is
dog
one of those.
timbering a squirrel is absolutely what you want.
And the last one here we're going to mention is Rule 8N. And Rule 8N reads, dog must be turned loose after tree is scored. However, if another dog is already treed, handler has the option to hold onto dog or turn loose, so long as at least one dog is still out hunting.
Yeah, okay, so this one's kind of a big one and comes into play quite a bit throughout the hunt. So there's a couple things I want to make sure we mention here in this one, and that is two things. There's the word, it mentions the word option. So we have an option to hang on to our dog or to turn it loose. And the other thing that comes up sometimes is the term leash lock. When are we leash locked? And you're actually not going to find the term or the word leash lock in the rules. But this is the rule that we're referring to when somebody mentions that you are leash locked. So let's give a couple examples just to make sure so we're clear. Let's use a 3-dog cast, dogs A, B, and C. So in the first one, let's say A has just been, was declared treed and has just been scored. I've got the dog on the lead again, and we're going to go maybe turn loose or not. Dogs B and C are both out running or out hunting. In this case, I have to turn dog A loose. B and C are both out hunting. I have no choice. I have to turn my dogs loose or my dog loose. It's got to be loose. Okay, that's one scenario. Let's change the scenario slightly and say we just took A again, just taking him off of a scoring situation, off a tree. B is declared treed somewhere and C is running. Okay, that's exactly the scenario we have now that it talks about. However, if another dog is already treed, handler has the option to hold on to dog or turn loose so long as at least one dog is still out hunting. That's the exact scenario we have. I'm taking this dog A out of a scoring situation. I've got dog B is declared treed and dog C is out hunting, not declared treed. That's in this scenario, I have the option as the handler to either hang on to dog A or I can turn him loose. It's my choice, one or the other. If I hang on to him, I'm going to walk him to dog B until we score that tree before I turn loose. Or I can just turn loose right away and we go to B and score it. So that's one. The third scenario here is, let's say I took dog A out of the scoring situation. Dog B and C are both declared treed. Now I have both dogs, all dogs declared, 2 dogs in the cast are declared treed, and I have mine, dog A, on leash. Now I don't have this last part of this rule. There's not a dog still out hunting. They're both treed. That's when I have no choice but to hang on to my dog. I don't have the option now because there's not a dog still out hunting. I have to hang on to that dog. And technically, this is where they call it I'm leash locked, even though there's not, you won't see the term leash lock. So you can argue, maybe a little bit different wording here in the rule may or may not make it any more clear, but that's, so those are the 3 scenarios. So sometimes you have to turn loose. If there's no dog declared treed, you have to turn loose. If one of them's declared treed and one's not, I have the option. If they're all declared treed, I can't. I have to hang on to the dog. Does that make sense?
Clear as day, I think.
So, and that's one that comes up quite a bit. So I think it's one that is worthy of taking a little time. And the other one is, why do we have to hang on to the dog? And as I understand it now, I was not involved with, like I was with maybe some other certain rules that we have in UKC, be it beagles or coonhounds or whatever. Knowing the intent of the rule sometimes helps. But it is assumed, I've had this conversation with some guys, and it's assumed the intent of this rule is to keep the cast together. In other words, you can have situations where maybe you had I've taken dog A out of a scoring situation, and we're going to B and C who are through there a little ways, and I turn A loose right here close by. Before we know it, we've just got dogs scattered out too far, maybe. So they say when all dogs are declared treed, we're going to keep the dogs together until we've scored all the trees. Then we're going to turn them loose just to kind of help keep them together.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Whether you agree with that or not, but that's why. So, got anything to add to it?
Well, I was just going to say, I guess keeping it on the leash would be like electing to bunt.
Yeah,
Play it as safe, and then if you cut loose, you're swinging away, swinging for the fences.
Yeah, there you go. Or sometimes there's sometimes the they pitch. What do they call that on an automatic walk or
intentional walk.
intentional walk? Yeah, things like that.
Try
yeah, so-
pitch out. Who knows?
Yeah.
All kinds of things.
Yeah, so we're not always swinging for the fences every time we come up to
You
bat.
got to play it safe sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you do. So sometimes it's yeah. So yeah, so you know what? Section 8 here in the rule book is has a lot of information in it and a lot of valuable information. And again, I always try to encourage if you're interested in competing, read these rules sometimes. You know, don't just listen to us, but it's good to turn that scorecard around or get you a rule book and read these. Put it in front of your eyes, and then second is not just reading, but go out there and apply them, learn to apply them. But Section 8 is a big part of the rule book as far as information goes.
Alan, I know we both have new Dogtra Pathfinder 2s. How are you liking yours so far?
I'm liking it. I've even had the opportunity now to use mine where I didn't have service, where I download the map of that area, and it works flawlessly. Love it.
I agree. I really like my Dogtra Pathfinder 2 as well. I've used it quite a bit the past few months. I really like the crystal clear maps. I like that it doesn't lose service very much, and I don't have many bad things to say about it at all. Dogtra Pathfinder 2, the official GPS collar partner of UKC. Thank you for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss any of our new episodes or content.